Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, I want to remind everybody off the top, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. So unless you've been living under a rock or have been blissfully off social media for the past couple of weeks, there's been an ongoing discussion about civility in society and civility in politics. And I've got some thoughts on it that I'd like to share with you. But let's just go ahead and start at the beginning of this story where this all thing kind of popped off, which was Sarah Huckabee Sanders was dining at this one restaurant called the Red Hen, and apparently some of the employees there had an issue with her being there, so they asked her to leave, and she did. Didn't make a scene, didn't make a fuss. The whole thing actually was handled in a very civil fashion, it seems, well, up until we find out some other stuff later. But that kicked off this whole thing of, oh my God, why did they ask her to leave? That's so rude. That's so uncivil. Which, I mean, it's their right to ask her to leave. I mean, it's their business. It's their property. Nobody's owed a meal. And for Sarah's part, she handled it fairly classy. Like, she just got up, she left, she didn't make a scene, she didn't make a fuss. She just apparently went to a restaurant that was across the street. And then it comes out a couple days later. I've seen it verified by a couple other people, but nobody really picked up on this part of the story, so I don't really know too much about the veracity of this. But apparently somebody from the Red Hen followed her to the restaurant across the street and was harassing her at that restaurant, which that's uncalled for. I mean, she did what you asked her to do. She got up, she left, she didn't make a big deal out of it. And you deciding to go make a big deal out of it kind of ended up making you look a lot shittier than you needed to. But ultimately, what ended up happening is apparently one of the employees made a Facebook post about asking Sarah to leave, which means Sarah then had to make a tweet about the situation, which means that everybody in the whole wide world now knew this happened, which probably, if nobody had said anything, if he hadn't posted on Facebook, nobody would even know that this happened. So the whole thing was just kind of stupid and silly. And like I said, it was handled in a civil fashion, but then it kicked off this whole discussion of civility. And then this idea of, oh my God, what if all business owners start doing this and we have to have Democrat restaurants and Republican restaurants? And I'm just like, you guys, seriously, no. Like, most business owners I know want to make money. They don't really care who you are or what your political affiliation is. And I mean, I guess if you're a business owner and you want to limit your clientele, that's on you, but don't be surprised when you have to close and we all point and laugh at you because you limited your business over some stupid, dumb bullshit. Now, if I was the owner of Red Hen, I would have smiled in her face, took her money, and then talked shit about her back in the kitchen. But like I said, it's their prerogative to serve or not serve whoever they feel like for whatever legal reason. And yeah, that's what started this whole discussion about civility and being nice, which it's really kind of funny to me because I personally don't have an issue with people being confronted in public, like especially elected officials. I don't know as if I would ever say anything to Sarah Huckabee Sanders if we were in the same restaurant. Like, she already kind of has a shitty job. I'm not going to pile on. I mean, she probably hates her fucking job as much as we hate her doing her job. So I don't know if I'd say anything to her, but as far as like seeing elected officials and stuff out, yeah, you can talk to these people as long as you're being nonviolent about it. You're not being like, you're not throwing punches at someone. Then yeah, it's kind of part of the job. Like, people are going to walk up to you and say things to you. It just kind of is what it is. But the whole conversation that we're having currently about civility seems to be based off this idea that there was some gilded age where we all sat around in parlors and sipped tea and ate finger sandwiches and just politely discussed our political differences, which that time has never, ever, 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 ever happened. Its political discussion has always been nasty and brutal and vicious and just blindsides and low blows and punching low. It's always been that way, even going all the way back to the founding fathers. I mean, if you know anything about the relationship between Thomas Jefferson and Adams, they started out as really tight friends. And then when Adams became president, Jefferson became his vice president. During that time, they actually grew to hate each other so much that they savaged each other in the press, didn't talk for years, and then eventually went back to being friends. But this idea that, like, there was a civility, and then even going forward from that, you've got the whole Hamilton-Burr duel, which, as I like to describe it, it's a duel where the Vice President of the United States mortally wounded the Secretary of Treasury in a duel over some petty bullshit. I mean, back then, when you had a political disagreement with somebody, shit got real. And that's just amongst politicians. That's not even how, like, what like, regular people would say to each other. So, like, this era of civility never really existed even back then. And then even going forward to more modern history, when you look back at the 60s and the 70s and kind of the atmosphere that we had back then, where you had civil rights protesters who had the cops turning the dogs and the hoses on them. You had protesters at Kent State where 4 kids got killed by National Guardsmen. Like, it has been way, 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 way worse than it is right now. And speaking of the 60s, Pew Global just did a poll about people in different countries about how they feel whether their country is better or worse now than it was 50 years ago. And 41% of the U.S. people polled reported that they thought the country was worse now than it was 50 years ago. And I'm not sure if these people didn't quite do the math or if they really just don't know U.S. history. But 50 years ago was 1968, which the 60s altogether was a very tumultuous, not the greatest time in the world for America. But 68 in particular was really, really bad. How bad was it? Let's recap the highlights of 1968. The Tet Offensive was launched, which that, on top of also having almost 24,000 troops conscripted into going into involuntary second tours in Vietnam, definitely started ramping up the Vietnam War protests. We also had the assassination of both Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy within months of each other. And for honorable mentions, there was also a plane hijacking, and the Zodiac Killer made his first appearance. So, yeah, 1968 was not a very good year. And like I said, I don't know if these people really just didn't do the math, or they really don't know history. But there's always this idea that whatever time you live in, you have this more outsized sense of how bad things are, and you have this dramatically, like, undersized sense of how bad things were 50 years ago, just to use this example. So it's never as bad as it seems when you're living it, and the past always seems a lot rosier than it actually was. And it was just funny to me that this just happened to be the year that 50 years ago would be 1968, which was really kind of one of the worst years in American history. So I just thought that was kind of funny. To get back to the civility discussion, though, like I said, obviously this is nothing new, but I think the way that it is being handled right now is somewhat new. Like, this is not an environment that Trump invented. Obviously, this is something that he tapped into through his whole campaign. And there's been keyboard warriors as long as there's been comment sections on the internet. So this is not anything new. I mean, people were nasty and ugly and vicious to each other online during the Obama years too, and during the Bush years. But it's like, it's odd because it's like, now that the President of the United States is engaging in this, it's kind of giving people on both sides of the political spectrum cover to be nasty. And I don't think the inauguration of Trump fundamentally changed anybody. I think everybody is who they've always been. But now there's more of this environment where you can just be openly ugly and nasty to each other, whereas maybe not so much before because you didn't have the President of the United States playing the game too. But it is and it isn't a different environment. I think what's happening under the Trump administration is that basically it's just like holding up a big, massive magnifying mirror to everybody. Like, under the Obama years, we had an Instagram filter. Everything was kind of softened and nice and everything looked good. And now you've got that magnifying mirror where you can see every single flaw that possibly exists. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, and I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. But I do think there is some value in finding out kind of who people actually are, and this environment where people feel like they're free to just be however nasty they want to be to other people, while it is ugly and gross, it is kind of educational. It's like now you're kind of finding out what's really going on here. There is one argument, however, that every time I see it, it gets on my last damn nerve. And that's this argument of, well, we have to be nasty to them because they were nasty to us first. Which, if I can give you guys a piece of advice here for being on social media or just in life, do not let others dictate your reaction to things. Just because somebody calls you a name or somebody's nasty to you does not mean that you need to return in kind. I mean, at best, you can just keep scrolling, keep it moving. You can choose to engage that person if you want, but don't lower yourself to somebody else's level. Like, that's not how you're going to make it through this. That's not how you're going to win an argument, if one can ever win an argument on social media. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Like, don't lower yourself to somebody else's level just because they're down there. It's like, you don't have to be down there too. And don't make that argument that that's why you did that, is because this other person did this to me. It's like, that's just childish. That's not how adults act. That's how children act. So maybe if we want to increase civility, I put that in air quotes, maybe the first step in that is to start acting like an adult instead of acting like a child when you engage with people on social media. To move on to more of my personal thoughts about the current situation as far as civility or incivility is concerned, I'm really of two minds on this topic. There is the nihilistic, burn it all to the ground part of me that's like, fuck it. If you want to out yourself as an asshole on social media, do it. Save us all the trouble of finding this out on our own. Like, if you're somebody who thinks it's fine to call people names and just dox them, do all this other shit to people just because you don't like what they have to say politically, out yourself. If you're the kind of person that thinks you get to beat somebody in the face with a bike lock because you don't like them, out yourself. If you're a racist, you're a misogynist, xenophobe, bigot, out yourself. Save us all the fucking trouble of trying to find this out on our own. But there's also the other part of me that I know that's not the most healthy stance as far as having actual discussions on social media and in real life. And it's one of those things where it's like I said, I'm all for people outing themselves as assholes, but it does create this environment where you can't have serious adult rational discussions with people. And there's a lot of things right now that I think, especially if we're already in this environment where we're just going to just lay it out a lot on the line and everybody's going to rip their masks off, then we can have some conversations about things. And there are some conversations that I think should be had that can't be had, because when you start being emotional, you can't have a rational discussion about things. And I'm starting to see this emotional element creep into places where it doesn't belong and it's not called for and it's not really the right tone to be taking. Next week, we'll talk about that next week. But yeah, it's just, I'm really of two minds of the topic. Another thing that really bothers me about the situation as it is when I see people or I hear people say that they deliberately don't engage in social media because of this environment. And that makes me sad. Like, I've talked about this before. I like social media. I like Twitter. I've made a lot of Twitter friends that I normally would not have had any way to talk to, and I do value those friendships. And it makes me sad to see people say that they don't want to engage because they're afraid of the Twitter mobs and the reactions and just all the bullshit that can be heaped on you. It's like you're driving away voices that could be very beneficial and could add something to the conversation, but they don't want to put themselves out there like that. And I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. And then kind of the continuation of the whole not wanting to engage argument that I see is people who are just flat out refusing to engage because they feel like there's no point. Like, there's no point in having discussion anymore. We should all just separate and be separate, and nobody should even attempt to try to talk or debate to people that don't agree with them. And I'm not I'm not there yet. I'm not ready to throw in the towel on honest debate. Like, I'll debate somebody on Twitter. I'm not going to sit here and like retweet trolls and deal with that. But like, if I have a genuine difference of opinion with you, like I'll debate you on it. But I'm not ready to throw in the towel on trying to at least talk to people, to try to influence people, maybe try to change their mind. Like, I know that's probably never going to happen, but I'm an optimist, and I'm not there yet. I'm not ready to just completely back away and be like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not even going to try. Okay, but to try to wrap this up on a somewhat more positive topic, something I'm starting to see, like the little bits here and there, are people, especially people on the left, people that identify as Democrats, who are getting really sick and tired of the whole perpetual outrage, the perpetual emotional, just the whole environment that is currently being created. And there's one tweet thread, I want to read it to you like verbatim, because this is the best takedown of the current situation, especially on social media with Democrats, that I have ever seen, and it is dead spot on. Again, apologies if you hear any kind of background noise. I just had to take my phone out of airplane mode to do this. So here's the tweet thread. It's by a guy named Brian Dean Wright, and it starts out, "Yes, I'm an angry Democrat. We're not a reasonable party anymore. We've exhausted ourselves with conspiracy and outrage while ignoring facts and careful analysis. Then we have the audacity to complain about the fatigue of it all. Let's review the party's madness. Since our 2016 election loss, we have flopped in every direction to find an excuse for our failure. Blame the 63 million deplorable Trump voters. Blame the Electoral College. Blame Comey. Blame the Russians. No. Stop it. Blame Clinton, the DNC, and her primary voters. They suck. About those Russians, we've assured ourselves that Trump is a Russian traitor. We held up the Steele dossier as proof. Never mind the CIA Director Brennan gave it no particular credence. Rather than let Mueller find the facts, we've already executed POTUS for treason. Meanwhile, we've defended the FBI, calling them unquestionable defenders of freedom. Never mind that Helen Keller could see that the senior ranks, Comey, Strzok, etc., deserve scrutiny and punishment. Indeed, the IG report laid out a damning case in painful detail. Oops. Socially, we've also fanned the flames of discord. After Charlottesville, we were more concerned about tearing down Confederate statues than holding Antifa's feet to the fire. And those statues, America wanted new ones next to the old. Add to history, not destroy it. But no. And then there was BLM. Less than 1,000 people die annually at the hands of a cop, out of 325 million people. And most of the dead are white. Studies do show people of color suffer harassment by cops at higher levels than whites, but not deaths. Where was that nuance? Now let's talk about Islam. Democrats scream that we're all Muslim while wearing scarves that actual Muslim women dream of taking off without being jailed. And what about Salafi Muslims who hate gays, science, and democracy? Are Democrats those Muslims too? Zero reason in this debate. Which leads to immigration. We were embracing abolish ICE, knowing full well the history of the abolish movement is to create open borders. Never mind that polls overwhelmingly show that Americans want illegals deported humanely and our borders strengthened. But them elites don't care. Now we're embracing socialism with no concern for its dark history or how we'd pay for all of these free programs. Normally the media would hold these folks accountable. But no. They're too busy calling socialists badass and super impressive. How objective? None of this means Trump or Republicans are the answer. Some of the garbage that's coming out of their mouths is equally wrong. But unless Democrats present a credible alternative, our arguments won't matter. Rightfully so. We have all whined and cried wolf one too many times. I'm done with progressives. I'm done with the resistance. I'm done with the Nazi talk, the bashing of Trump voters. I'm done with the refusal to own our own mistakes. And yes, I'm done with folks like Ian Michael Black, who sit in mansions and complain of fatigue. They can pound sand. I mean, damn, dude. Like, he ain't wrong at all. But it's amazing to see that some Democrats are finally getting to this point where they're like, this is all, everything that has happened since Trump has been elected, that we have done has been complete and utter bullshit, waste of time nonsense that has gotten us nowhere. And it's not like these tweets have been like unpopular. Let's see, on the first tweet of the thread, he's at 2,318 retweets with 4,245 likes. And actually what's more telling is the last tweet in the thread, the one that starts with "I'm done with progressives, I'm done with the resistance," is at 1,851 retweets with 5,718 likes. So this is not an unpopular opinion. It's not like wildly like super duper popular, but it's something that I'm starting to see coming from the left. And I think obviously it's not a great idea, like just, well, actually in this case it is kind of a great idea to put somebody on blast on social media. But it's nice to see that like maybe there is an end in sight. Like it's coming to a point where it, especially on the left, because something I've always noticed is like when righties do the whole outrage thing, it's like, okay, some of them are serious some of the time, but a lot of the time it's trolling, it's trying to be assholes, it's trying to start shit. But when the left does it, they're serious, like they mean it deep down in their heart of hearts. Like the outrage is just, ugh. And it's nice to see that there are some that are finally like, stop, just fucking stop it. Stop it with the excuses. Stop it with the whataboutism. Stop it with blaming everybody else. Stop it with Russia. Stop it with worshiping the FBI. Stop it with finding every other reason for Hillary's loss other than Hillary. Let's finally face facts. And it's like, not that I want Democrats to like ever win anything. Like I don't like them any more than I like Republicans. But it's something that I've been waiting to see ever since Trump got elected, and maybe finally like they'll grow up and start being adults again, hopefully, maybe, I don't know. It's hope, it's progress, I think, of a sort. And another thing that struck me about this is the use of the word fatigue, which this is something that I've thought for a long time. I don't think I've ever had a chance to discuss it on the podcast, but this whole idea of just perpetual outrage culture, just being mad about things all the time, is got to be fucking exhausting. Like, you're gonna burn yourself out. Like, you're gonna burn out neurotransmitters in your brain or something. I really don't know how that works, but you can't just be running on adrenaline all the time. Like, you gotta stop. Like, and this is, I hopefully we're getting to the point where this starts to wind down, but yeah, I've always thought that, like, there would be an end to this, because it's just, you can't sustain it. Like, people are going to get worn the fuck out and just get tired of it and be like, you know what, this is bullshit, I'm not playing this game anymore, it's not fun, it's not getting me anything, I'm just angry all the time, and now I'm tired. So that's what kind of struck me about that, is the use of the word fatigue, because I think that really sums up maybe where we're going with this, is people are just gonna get flat fuck tired of doing this. It's gonna be tired of just getting outraged over petty shit all the time. And then eventually enough people are just gonna be like, you know what, I'm not doing it anymore, to where it stops being a thing, because nobody wants to engage it as a thing. So I do think there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I don't think that this is gonna go on for forever and ever and ever the way it is. So at this point, let me go ahead and just wrap this up. I think I've said pretty much everything I wanted to say. So if you do like this, as always, I want to remind you, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Take care, and until next time.